you awakening wonders. Thanks for joining me today for Stay Free with Russell Brand, and what an extraordinary episode it is. Have you wondered what a Scottish mystic might make of all these bizarre globalist events unfolding right now? Extraordinarily, mysteriously, potentially occultistly, if that's a word, before our very eyes. Well, Neil Oliver's got some perspectives on how global power will shift and maneuver after the Trump MAGA ascent. Are there things he's disappointed in? Are there things he's excited about? And how will it affect the UK and the rest of the world? Because if globalism means one thing, it means the entire planet and centralized systems of power. How does it affect the farming protests? How does it affect Christianity? How does it affect those of us that once were content to look at the world from an entirely material and rational perspective, to start to recognize that it seems that dark power is at work? If you've not watched Neil Oliver before, you might know him from GB News. You might know him as the Coast Guy on X. He is an excellent and brilliant commentator, beloved by many people in power in secret, and I would say one of the most significant broadcasters to emerge out of the pandemic period. For the first 15 minutes, we'll be on YouTube. After that, we'll be exclusively streaming on Rumble, where we can speak freely. If you want to speak as freely as I speak, you've got to be on Rumble. That's why you should consider getting Rumble Premium for a frictionless experience of Rumble. And if you're not an Awakened Wonder yet, become one now and see my conversation with Jack Posobiec, as well as a fantastic conversation coming up with Jonathan Peugeot, where we talk about Christianity from a variety of perspectives, but mostly how a resurgent Christianity will affect and impact politics, not the other way around. But without any further hullabaloo or senseless nonsense, let's welcome to Stay Free with Russell Brand, Brand, I think my name is, Neil Oliver. Neil, thanks so much for joining us. I know that you're sort of in a state of bewilderment. I know that our country, the UK, seems sort of like chaotic and creepy, and that there are sort of like high profile stories about the murder of children, where there's the sense that not all is being revealed to the public. I also know that sort of the election of Trump as kind of one of the clear positives is it demonstrates the power of independent media versus what you might call centralized, legacy media. Whether you like Trump or don't like Trump, what is clear now is that the axis between state and media is no longer sufficiently powerful to control the outcome of elections, something that we started to suspect, maybe with Napster, then the Occupy movement, then the Arab Spring, then Brexit, then Trump 2016, and now Trump 2024. And whatever these powers are that seek to prevent these kind of popular online movements gaining traction, they must now be terrified that in the UK there could be popular, dissenting, disobedient uprisings that could get political traction. Across the world, everyone must be feeling that. How do you feel, in particular, Neil, that the election of Trump, and I know there are aspects of that you'll have questions about, some of his appointments, for example, but how is that affecting directly the area in which much of your sort of political expertise is spent, UK politics? Media.
Well, just as the form of words you used there, I hadn't thought about, or it hadn't crystallized for me that the election of Trump is a victory for, or a demonstration of the power of the alternative independent media. That is, I think I knew that, but I hadn't actually the thought crystallized for me. But that in and of itself is a victory, because I'm sure the deep state or whatever wanted and intended the election to go in another direction. There's absolutely a rising awareness in the UK, a rising tide of discontent. It's being felt. It manifests among more and more people. Just this on the 19th of the month, just a day or two ago, there was the first of the big farmers' protests in London. I don't know, tens of thousands, let's say, of the disaffected, of those affected by the imposition of the inheritance tax on family farms and all of the rest of it, gathered in London. People are definitely, sounding off on social media, to the extent that the judiciary, which is in somebody's pocket or under somebody's influence, is sending to jail people who are posting unwanted opinions on social media, while space is made for those people in those prisons by, the freeing early of often violent criminals. There is, without a doubt, a tide rising, and I think it's unstoppable. It's all across Europe. We've seen the increased vote for so-called populist parties from east to west across Europe, and the increasingly futile, blatantly futile attempts by the incumbent legacy politicians to thwart the intentions of more and more of the people. There has been a change in the wind, and you can feel it.
Yeah, there really has. And like, just thinking then, like, that you're a person like me that's gone from having a relatively comfortable role in the culture. Some people might not know that, like, your early popularity was based on quite pastoral and folkish broadcasting around, like, fascinatingly rendered stories about ghosts and the supernatural and British landmarks and British history, and like that you are like a patron of significant ecological organizations in your country, Scotland. And like now, like when I talk to you, like that brilliant clip in that Scottish comedy show demonstrated, we're like druid hysterics on the edge of the culture. Me, I was a sort of a harmless and hapless Hollywood hero, for want of a better alliterative construction. And like now, I'm like an attacked, maligned, outspoken, smeared, and much discussed, and in some quarters deeply loathed online pundit and whack job. Although I did see on the front of Private Eye, I'm being considered for Archbishop of Canterbury. As at least for one of the candidates, Neil. So
good luck with that. At least you've accepted Christianity, which is something that the previous incumbent of the post did not seem to have done.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an upgrade in regard that I believe in Jesus Christ, which you would think would be the minimum requirement for the Archbishop of Canterbury. So Neil, I wonder how you, like me, are coping as while you're affiliated with and very successful on GB News, which is a sort of a growing online British media platform. How are you continuing to cope with this position? And now that we've touched on the subject of Christianity, how are you bringing together your previous experience, which was you're always excellent at bringing together mythical themes, historical themes, and contemporary meaning and challenges. How are you going to bring together, and how do you continue to bring together those kind of sometimes arcane, and I don't mean that pejoratively, ideas with the ongoing political discourse? Say when it comes to something like farmers' protests and the power of agriculture, or why those movements are global, and let's start there.
Well, the kind of documentary television, soft pastoral television that I was involved with for years, decades, it was, I suppose, if it had a unifying theme, there was something celebratory about it. It was about encouraging people to pay attention to the landscape, pay attention to the depth of history and archaeology. There was always supposed to be a note of awe, trying to inspire people to look again at landmarks and stories from history that they might have vaguely known, largely forgotten, but it's always timely to look again at some of those things. That was the idea that underpinned a lot of what I was trying to do. And now cast in this unlikely way, this unasked for way into the role of contrarian, and as you say, dismissed and ridiculed, in the pages of national newspapers, and my ethics questioned, my sanity questioned, and all of the rest of it. In order to try and make sense of that, I continue to reflect on the past and on the landscape. We're just mentioning the farmers and farming. I come from an archaeological background academically, and I've been telling stories for the longest time about the advent of farming in this part of the world. We've been farming this part of the world one way and another for several thousand years. And so many of the landmarks with which people are familiar in this part of the world, Stonehenge and Avebury, the chamber tombs, so much that people celebrate in the British landscape, were the work of farmers. And when I think about the fact now that farmers are being driven off the land, the resident government, the resident sort of quasi-communist regime is seeking to grab the land, drive the people off the land who've been there from a time beyond the reach of memory, it becomes so moving, because it is of course of huge significance to the people there now, those people who expected in due course to hand on the farms and the traditions to their children and their children's children. It's intensely important and moving and upsetting in the present. But when you know that it comes on the tail end of thousands of years of occupation of the land by people who have used that landscape to feed the people, today's generations of farmers become part of something much grander, much bigger, much more deeply rooted. And the idea that, here today, gone tomorrow, politicians would seek to uproot all of that, when all of the recent history of our species, certainly in the 20th century, has shown that any regime seeking to displace the farmers, to collectivize farming, to centralize the creation and distribution of food is murderous. You've only got to look back at what Stalin did in Ukraine and in that part of Russia, that led to the deaths of millions, and not by accident, but deliberately. It was a deliberate campaign to destroy the so-called kulaks, the slightly better off farming community there. But tens of millions of people died. Mao did the same thing in China, centralized and collectivized farming, leading to a mountain of corpses. And that Keir Starmer, leading a Labour Party, a so-called Labour Party in Britain, would seek to uproot all of that by this inheritance tax, which will inevitably drive people off of the land and, God knows, drive many of them to suicide and everything else. It takes on a depth of wickedness that, frankly, is hard to process. But that way that I feel about that comes from the fact that I did spend decades celebrating the landscape, not seeking to push people off of it.
We can't do any more of this conversation on YouTube. Start the countdown. Now, if you want to hear me and Neil talking about a variety of subjects that simply cannot be permitted on a platform like YouTube, where the trusted news initiative censor and control, where big state agencies are able to infiltrate, then you're going to have to click that link right now. Click it now. Join us over on Rumble. Sorry about that, Neil. Let's get back to what we were discussing. Do you think that it's... Do you think that the reason there's farming protests all over the world is because there's some global concerted effort to gain control over the land? And how do we